This was the subject was implications on national security, public safety, government transparency. I don't think there's never been anything like it as far as this type of a hearing. It definitely signals that the issue has crossed a threshold. The idea of having government agencies take seriously unidentified flying objects or unidentified anomalous phenomena to respond to things that are witnessed by people in the military, government agencies, or contractors, to say that if it's bizarre or surreal and they don't understand what they just saw, that there is some kind of response to it. Normally, that's the kind of thing that has been discrediting. We'll get into that. So Ryan Graves is the executive director for Americans for Safe Aerospace. Commander David Fravor is a former commanding officer of the United States Navy. And then David Grush is someone who used to be with the National Reconnaissance Office. And he was apparently a part of the UAP task force, and this falls under the Defense Department. As far as this goes, I'm going to break this down by first discussing the things we learn about the secrecy regime around claims of witnessing these unidentified objects or phenomena, and then what needs to be done. I'm interested in what is going to take place to protect people, make it easier for them to come forward. As somebody who covers and writes about whistleblower stories all the time, I found it important to follow what Graves was saying, but I have a lot of skepticism about David Grush, and I'll get into that as I play the clips. I'm not very familiar with Fravor, so there aren't really any clips of him. And if I come back to him as somebody who speaks on this issue at a later date, that'll have to be acceptable to you. But the clips that I have are of Graves, and then I have several of Grush. And so let's begin here with what we have. This is Graves, and he's discussing what needs to be done to make it easier for people to come forward and talk about what they believe they have seen.
What steps do you think have to be taken to improve a pilot's UAP reporting, be it military or commercial?
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs. There is a fear that the stigma associated with this topic is going to lead to professional repercussions, either through management or perhaps through their yearly physical check. So having a secure system, reducing the stigma, and making this information available through the public is going to reduce the concerns that aircrew have.
Could you just give me a little idea of the degree to which reports in the past are not made public right now?
Well, I don't think there has been a proper reporting system to gather those reports and thus not report them. So to answer your question, I think there is a dearth of data due to the fact that the reporting has been limited up to this time.
And so I think that's very valuable testimony to say that there's a stigma, and that if somebody really and truly sees something that's unidentified and hard to explain, they believe it's engaged in maneuvers that they haven't seen before. They're not aware of any adversaries or any rival countries, rival powers that have that kind of aircraft technology or technology in just phenomena that they can't explain, that they would be able to speak to their superiors or go through some kind of channel and not be stigmatized, because you just want to leave room for the unexplained. And to say that there are reports and there are things that are in databases that are classified, that we're not able to read, that have no implications for national security, and again, it's an abuse of the secrecy system, as we see all the time. I believe that that is something that we should take seriously. And it looked like with the hearing, there was bipartisan support. This was rare harmony. One of the reasons why I find this to be an unusual hearing is you had Democrats there and you had Republicans, and usually these oversight hearings have been tremendously contentious. The partisanship over oversight is worse at its worst level. Uh, you can't get any group of witnesses before this committee, it would seem, and not have one side attacking the character of the witnesses who are brought before them. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not here to assassinate the character of anybody before, even if I question what is being said. I think that's just because I have to be a reasonable or responsible person when I consider these issues. So my questions about Grush are not going to be to assail him. I'm not really sure where he comes from exactly, but I mean, I know what agency he works for, but I don't know a lot about his history and involvement with this. But there were very serious questions that were asked by both Republicans and Democrats. They treated this with seriousness while discussing the issue of UAPs or UFOs. So here's a clip I'm going to show first of Grush. This is here we go.
In your complaint to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, you claim that you believe information is being hidden. What kind of information do you think was hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner. As you know, the preponderance of my complaint was classified to the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAPs but not sharing it with intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots, that kind of information. Yeah.
Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank.
Anyone been murdered that you would that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential area, SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
It is unfortunate that anyone would be able to claim that they were denied access to information on something, so sensitive that you could have a person like David Grush come before you and claim that he's spoken to people who know other people who might know some people who have been killed over this, but he can't say in an open session exactly what has been done to harm people. I mean, on one hand, that sounds very serious, and it would implicate, I would think, people working in the Pentagon and in killings. It sounds like something for like a sci-fi thriller. Definitely, my mind is racing, trying to keep up with what this would mean if, in fact, Grush is telling the truth. But it's also bizarre that as you watch the testimony from Grush, he will say vague information or he'll make vague statements, and then when pushed on specifics, he won't give them because he's claiming that it would jeopardize his ability to pursue his whistleblower retaliation claim within the proper channel that he went through. And he went through something called the Presidential Policy Directive 19. That sounds like gobbledygook to any person who's a citizen in the US. But this was something that was issued by President Barack Obama. And in order to get the Congress to back off of passing what would have been stronger whistleblower protections and would have applied to employees or contractors in intelligence agencies. He set up this mechanism just by executive order, so to speak, by his directive. And it still is in force. It was in force under Trump. It's in force under Joe Biden, and that's available. And that's what David Grush went through to claim the retaliation. He's using the words administrative terrorism. I take very seriously. Anytime somebody would talk like that, and if you're going to come out and say that you've been the target of administrative terrorism, you're putting people who you claim are at risk to your life on notice that you're going to talk about this at least vaguely. I mean, you're not going to stay quiet. You're not going to be intimidated. I would think that if you're going to say that they have committed or engaged in administrative terrorism, that you would say what that is. And he had the opportunity, and he has other opportunities throughout the hearing. He did have them to speak to what the specific retaliation was. And David Grush never said what specifically it was that he experienced. So let me show another clip here that I have queued up. This is with Representative Jamie Raskin.
Mr. Grush, what about you? What was your experience after you came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so, so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people. So,
I think I might have just played that video back to back. I apologize for that. But again, there it is. What I said earlier goes, he was someone who, he's making these claims. He's making these claims that are very serious.
Do you have knowledge, or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say that they're above congressional oversight, what do you mean?
Complicated question. So there's, some, I would call it abuse here. So congressional oversight of conventional special access programs, so I'll use Title 10, so DOD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional oversight of SAPs, discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting. However, the Gang of Eight is at least supposed to be notified if a waived or waive bigoted unacknowledged SAP is created, and that's public law.
Well, so that how does, I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
does that mean
self-fund.
does that mean that there is money in the budget that is said to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
Okay.
So my understanding is that if you are in front of a committee and you're making disclosures, that they should be protected. And I would imagine that as they are being shared, um, I mean, unless all this stuff is properly classified, he should be able to speak to the misappropriation of funds, unless he's talking about money in a black budget or something in which the public isn't supposed to know how the funds have been arranged so that they can be spent in a certain manner. I think what he's saying is true. It would probably check out that there are ways in which money that is extra or I guess unnecessary could be funneled into different programs that would be beyond oversight. I think that's an important thing to discuss, whether it's facilitating the cover up of unidentified anomalous phenomena. We have to see the specifics. Again, there aren't any there. So I'm interested if there's anything to substantiate it. And I didn't mean to play the same clip twice, but having discussed it and pair that moment with this moment in the hearing, there's multiple times here where he's asked about this and won't give up documents, but he is at the same time confirming something that the Pentagon might want to keep secret. So he is putting himself at risk theoretically. And so what I'm having difficult time understanding as somebody who watched this hearing in real time and now goes back and considers it is, what is the risk? What is really and truly the risk to this individual, and how much of it is made up, or, did he just put himself in harm's way in testifying at the hearing? And this doesn't seem to be like an individual, the way he's behaving. And he did an interview for News Nation. This doesn't really seem to be somebody who could, I think, be retaliated against in a way that was violent, but it doesn't seem like somebody who's afraid. And in fact, I think the transparency probably protects him. So I don't know why he won't share more of the details. That being said, here's another.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress have talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up. But please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in a SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right.
And so again, no specifics to be shared. And what's interesting about that moment as they have their exchange is that David Grush's claim about the 1930s, what he's saying, he mentions that there's been an international cover-up. Well, he's not telling you the specifics, but there was an interview back in June with News Nation, and he said that the Vatican is part of this cover-up, and it's been going on for 90 years. It's a 90-year cover-up that goes back to 1933, according to David Grush, that the Italian government under Benito Mussolini recovered a UAP which it then, quote, moved to a secure airbase in Italy for the rest of the fascist regime until 1944, 1945. He said that. He never said that during the hearing yesterday, to my knowledge, but he shockingly claims that Pope Pius XII back-channeled that, and the Vatican told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it. There's no photos, there's no documents. I don't even think this is in, I don't know if this is in his Inspector General submission, but to me, this begins to be discrediting. First, the lack of consistency. It's not top there. It's not in this presentation. If this is true, if this is real, and you've seen this, you should be leading with this, and you should be leading with any evidence you have of it, and leading with where people could find that evidence. But if it's just, to use a trope, a stereotype, if it's just a kind of tinfoil hat claim that is being put forward, then it makes it hard to take seriously you, and it makes it hard to take seriously the other two witnesses. It taints the hearing, and it makes it difficult to give this the attention that could be warranted. Where, again, as I led in discussing, we should be protecting people who want to come forward. We should be making channels open. There shouldn't be secrecy. There should be this information. If there are videos and there's something in there that's unexplained, perhaps we could share it with the public. NASA could investigate. Dollars could be spent to look at the different ways in which things enter our atmosphere that have never been seen before, and what was it, and how do you explain it? And I am interested in those inquiries, but it's very hard to take someone like David Grush seriously if he's going to make these claims about cover-ups that go back over 90 years and involve the Vatican. And it just sounds like something Tommy Lee Jones said as a throwaway line in Men in Black, and then Will Smith's like, "Oh, that really happened? I never thought that happened." And Tommy Lee Jones is like, "Yeah, that really did happen." So, anyways, I've got a couple more here that are of interest.
At one point, you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity, and I got to
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Okay. One of my constituents actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
He has to be careful about whether he describes whether he's seen aircraft or not. I mean, yes or no. It's a simple yes or no. I mean, the purpose of this hearing is to share your experiences. And I mean, what was it or was it not in like an Inspector General claim? What did you? I mean, it starts to stretch your patience as to the way in which these questions are answered. And this was one of the biggest hearings on Capitol Hill of the summer. Other oversight hearings haven't gotten as much attention culturally. It was the Barbenheimer of Capitol Hill hearings. And there were people talking about it who don't pay attention to activity on Capitol Hill. And then you've got people there holding themselves out as whistleblowers who are being treated seriously, when I think there's reasons to be skeptical about what they're coming forward with and whether there are risks. And that's not to diminish, I think, the fact that you should look into these anomalous phenomena and allow for scientific discovery and inquiry. And we have so many things happening in our world, and this is what people spent time going through. And I'm probably guilty of a distraction, but I was trying to find the positive in this, because perhaps it will chip away at some of the secrecy around military agencies, around intelligence agencies, open up a channel. And it's possible that there will be more protections for people who come forward with UFO stories or UAP stories than people who come forward and blow the whistle on war crimes. So just think about that, because the NDAA had a provision for UFO whistleblower protection. And actually, I think around the same time that this was put forward, there was an effort to try and reform the Espionage Act. And it ended up that lawmakers went, yeah, no, like, let's not get this correct. Let's not address the law that is targeting dissent. But I think people who come forward and claim to see these UAPs, we should give them an avenue to discuss. And if they observed it, I mean, we don't know, did they really see anything or not? But they should be able to talk about that stuff. And so, yeah, let me play one more. And in case you're still gonna give David Grush the benefit of the doubt, I got one more video and I have to play this. I know I've gone on and on. I've gone on for about 25 minutes now with this. I think it's warranted given the amount of time that was spent on Capitol Hill. So we have to kind of unravel what this was all about. That way people have no misconceptions. And so here's the last thing I'll play for you.
The other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me, and it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion, yes.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I just don't know what to say. You lose me. I love science fiction movies and I'm open to these ideas, but even I don't think somebody coming forward and claiming that the explanation for why this is happening is that some beings from other dimensions are projecting themselves down to Earth is remotely worth airing out in any setting. And the holographic principle is actually, you can find it on the NASA website, and I'll read it to you. And it doesn't say anything about how you could travel it does actually explain what he is saying. It says that it's yet unproven, but there could be a maximum amount of information content held by regions adjacent to any surface. Therefore, counterintuitively, the information content inside a room depends not on the volume of the room, but on the area of the bounding walls. And the principle derives from the idea that the Planck length, the length scale where quantum mechanics begins to dominate classical gravity, is one side of an area that can hold only about one bit of information. And, this is not anything I really grasp. I'm not a physicist. I don't really know quantum mechanics. And I don't even know if David Grush does or not. But he certainly can talk. He certainly held and captivated the attention of these lawmakers who were there, who spent time doing this. And, is it interesting? Yeah. Is it possibly just a lot of distraction? It could be. I don't know. Will any of this ever be substantiated? I don't know. Do I get to see the Inspector General complaint that David Grush made? We would all like to know exactly. And there are definitely other things that are more important in the military industrial complex. And then, Martin, you ask if WikiLeaks ever released anything to do with UFOs and aliens. To my knowledge, that was not anything that they ever had archives of that were shared. And it would be interesting to see what information related to any of these phenomena are in the archives, and like why, to learn why our government doesn't want us to read them, and what their justification was to hide them from the public, because I'm interested in the abuse of secrecy that is constant by the security state. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot to what David Grush is speaking about. There is an experience from the early 2000s that Graves shares. He probably saw what he saw. I don't know what he saw. Again, that's like what a lot of these are. I'm open to it. People talk about their UFO sightings. They swear by what they've seen. They can't explain it. One of my most favorite movies of all time is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So I'm open to these ideas, but it just looks like at least the guy in the middle of the three, David Grush, he might be selling something that doesn't quite add up to members of Congress. And I wish there was more critical attention given to it. For the amount of interest that this generated, I don't like the idea that I would have to question whether or not somebody is a whistleblower, but I don't really know. I don't really grasp, and I don't really know if it is substantiated that anything has been exposed here. So